भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दाय तपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तन्न विदुः सुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
Gurubhyo Namaha. We continue with Chapter 4, Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, the Yoga of Knowledge, of Renunciation of Action. Translation and commentary by Maharishiji, and I am giving the essence. We finished the sloka or the verse number 35, and we will continue with 36 and 37 today. In the last verse, Bhagavan gave Arjuna the technique of rising above the possibility of delusion. He educated Arjuna in the philosophy of delusion. He emphasized the importance of gaining knowledge of unity in God consciousness, and further to completely eliminate the duality. And then he declared, "You will see all beings in yourself and also in me, O Arjuna." Again, you will see all beings in yourself and also in me. He further told Arjuna that the intensity of this union cultures man's consciousness, which begins to find everything inseparable from the self. And further, this union removes the veil of Prakriti from the Supreme Being. And when this veil is removed, then life is dominated by the light of knowledge, the light of awareness of life's unity in God consciousness. And this then establishes eternity in the ephemeral world. Finally, he emphasized that the seeing of everything in God is not restricted to the limitation of vision, but it is on the level of life as a whole. It is on that high level of life which corresponds to the life of God Himself. Fortunate is man that he can rise to the life of God. Now, in this present verse, Bhagavan is telling Arjuna how to cross over all evil by the raft of knowledge alone. We have seen how sin produces coarseness in the nervous system and then prevents it from functioning normally. So this violation of nature called sin also obstructs its ability to give rise to pure consciousness. And so when the nervous system is impaired, then it prevents the being from directly influencing the field of activity. So again, by attacking the physical structure of the nervous system, then the pure consciousness from being lived in daily life is prevented. And this is how sin causes sorrow and suffering. So here Bhagavan is recommending to take refuge in knowledge in order to rise above the possibility of any sin in life, and he promises redemption even to the worst sinner in the world. Here again, knowledge not only eliminates the possibility of the sin, but also roots out all possibility of sorrow and suffering. Further, Bhagavan promises release from the bondage of any wrong action through knowledge. So here, in the next verse, which is verse number 37, he promises the actual annihilation of all action in the fire of knowledge. Here are the next two verses. Apichedasi papebhya sarvebhya papakruttamaha sarvam gnana plavenaiva vrujinam santarishyasi. Next, yadhaidhamsi samidhugnir bhasma satkurute arjunaha gnanagni sarvakarmani bhasma satkurute tatha. Now, here is the English translation, verse number 36. Even if you were the most sinful of all sinners, you would cross over all evil by the raft of knowledge alone. I repeat, even if you were the most sinful of all sinners, you would cross over all evil by the raft of knowledge alone. Next, as a blazing fire turns fuel into ashes, so does the fire of knowledge turn all actions into ashes. I will repeat this when we are dealing with the verse. So Bhagavan, in verse number 35, he extolled the knowledge for the effectiveness in destroying delusion. Now he is speaking of its effectiveness in destroying sin, the same knowledge which is effective in destroying the sin. And this special value of this knowledge, the knowledge of the self, lies in the fact that it eliminates the necessity for gaining knowledge about wrong action. So again, you don't have to spend time in gaining the knowledge about wrong action, what is wrong action and what is sinful. But in essence, you gain the knowledge of the divine, and this knowledge of the divine is what is necessary. and not the knowledge of action, wrong action, and inaction as referred to in verse 17. So again here, when you gain the highest knowledge, when you gain the knowledge of the self, then the knowledge of the action, the wrong action and inaction are not as important, because you will directly know what is the right action. And besides, Bhagavan is explaining that all actions are burned to ashes by the fire of knowledge. Now let us go back to the verse and look at the phrase. First phrase, even if you were the most sinful of all sinners, you would cross over all evil by the act of knowledge alone. So let's take this phrase. You would cross over all evil by the act of knowledge alone. Here, the word alone indicates that nothing other than knowledge is necessary for a man to cross over all evil. Again, nothing other than knowledge is necessary for a man to cross over all evil. Now, try to understand how one goes beyond evil in the state of enlightenment. Now let us see how one goes beyond evil in the state of enlightenment. We saw in verse 35 that knowledge takes a man beyond delusion and molds his life in the oneness of God consciousness. We understood that in this state, one's life is on the supreme level of existence, being united with the Lord of all, or the Paramatma. So when one attains this God consciousness in the oneness of God, or the oneness of God consciousness, then all the laws of nature respond favorably to such a life. So here the nature's support comes spontaneously because one's life is in tune with the almighty, invincible force of nature. And it is this almighty nature which is working out the evolution of everything in creation. So, in such a state, a man's every thought, word and action produce a life-supporting influence for himself and for the whole universe. So here, in this state of life, then no wrong action is possible, because this person's every thought, word and action produce only a life-supporting influence. In other words, his life is for Loka Kalyanam, or for the welfare of the world. So, in this state, one has crossed over all evil by the act of knowledge. Now, let's look at the next phrase. Even if you were the most sinful of all sinners, you would cross over all evil by the act of knowledge alone. Here, try to understand, knowledge is irresistible, but no one can resist himself. The state of knowledge at one level is the state of one's own self, which is the transcendental consciousness. Now, at another level, it is the state of the self in the midst of activity, which is the cosmic consciousness. And at yet another level, it is the state of God consciousness. So what we are seeing here is that knowledge and the knowledge of action and the knowledge of activity, is varying in different states of consciousness. But when we come to enlightenment, then it is irrespective of anything in the relative field, and then nothing can be an obstacle to enlightenment. Because all the different states of consciousness, starting from the cosmic to God, they are all in the relative state of consciousness. And enlightenment is irrespective of anything in the relative field. So here it is important to understand that one is the self. The self is separate in the cosmic consciousness, and the self and the non-self come together in the God consciousness. Then one is enlightened. The various obstacles to enlightenment are removed. So again, when Maharishiji says enlightenment is irrespective of anything in the relative field, that means here we need to understand that enlightenment is something beyond this relative field and the ignorance of the relative field. Further, however dense the darkness and however long it may have existed, one single ray of the rising sun is enough to dispel the darkness. So one ray of the rising sun is enough to dispel the darkness, though it takes time to reach the brightness of the midday sun. Now, in the same way, even a momentary flash of transcendental consciousness, or the Turiya Sthiti, is enough to dispel the delusion of ignorance, though it takes time to gain full enlightenment in God consciousness. And when you attain the God consciousness, one has crossed over all evil by the act of knowledge. So, this brings hope even to a man whose life may have been full of wrongdoing. Again, we need to understand what does sin do? Sin produces coarseness in the nervous system, and it prevents it from functioning normally and obstructing its ability to give rise to pure consciousness. So this violation of natural law, or the sin, further impairs or prevents being from directly influencing the field of activity. So try to understand that it is important to protect the nervous system and prevent this sin, prevent these violations of nature, by attacking the physical structure of the nervous system and thus preventing the pure consciousness from being lived in daily life. This sin causes sorrow and suffering. So this direct knowledge of the self then eliminates the possibility of impairing the nervous system and also root out all possibility of sorrow and suffering. So the most important point in this verse is that however long one has been a sinner, and however worse one has been a sinner, that is, even if one has been the worst sinner in the world, that one can be redeemed by gaining this knowledge, and gaining the cosmic consciousness. So this is the greatest hope for every human being, to be released from the bondage of any wrong action through knowledge. So in the next verse, he promises the actual annihilation of all action in the fire of knowledge. So here is verse number 37. As a blazing fire turns fuel to ashes, so does the fire of knowledge turn all actions into ashes. I repeat again. As a blazing fire turns fuel to ashes, so does the fire of knowledge turn all actions into ashes. Now we have seen that the knowledge of the self is by which all sins are cast away, and this is described in verse number 30. And then in verse number 35 it is said, it is because of this knowledge you will see all beings in yourself and also in me. So here knowledge means awareness, and which in its nature is pure consciousness. So in this pure consciousness, the knowledge is devoid of any activity. And that is why Bhagavan says that the fire of knowledge turns all actions into ashes. So when this state has become permanently established in the nature of the mind, then the self is experienced as separate from activity and its fruits. So again, try to understand that in the transcendental consciousness or the pure consciousness, there are no actions, there is no activity. So when this is permanently established in the nature of the mind, and the self is it experiences itself as separate from activity, then it becomes the cosmic consciousness. So this fire of knowledge, the fire of cosmic consciousness, turns all actions into ashes. Further, when this state of consciousness and this knowledge reaches its consummation in God consciousness, the separation of the self from activity dissolves into oneness of the self and activity. So again, when the self and the activity come together in God consciousness, this separation of the self from activity dissolves into oneness of the self and activity. So in this oneness of God consciousness, in this supreme state, the fire of knowledge turns all actions into ashes. Let me read the verse again so that you understand it. As a blazing fire turns fuel to ashes, so does the fire of knowledge turn all actions into ashes. Now, in verse number 33, Bhagavan said that all action culminates in knowledge. Once the knowledge of the self has been gained, actions have to come to an end. So the individual actions of the individual mind have fulfilled their final purpose. So in this situation, the man has risen to a state of consciousness above the reach of activity. So if this is so, then how is the activity in the world carried out? So all activity, mental and physical, is carried out under the direct influence of the forces of nature, which are unconcerned with the consciousness of the doer. So here, the doer finds himself established in a level of life which has nothing in common with the field of action. So, in this state, the action that is performed ceases to be, which means it ceases to engage the consciousness of the actor. So, even while acting, the actor is free of the action here, and that is what Bhagavan says. This fire of knowledge turns all actions into ashes. Now, let us try to understand what does all actions mean. When Bhagavan says all actions are turned into ashes. Here, all actions are both qualitative and quantitative. All actions include the range of time, past, present, and future. The impressions of past actions, which serve as the seed for future actions, they become like roasted seeds, losing their potency because of this knowledge. So again, this is how the actions of the past are burnt in the fire of knowledge. Now what happens to the present actions? The actions performed in the present remain on the level of the mind and senses, and they do not touch the depths of the mind anchored to being. And therefore, no deep impressions are created to be stored as the seed for future actions. So again, the present actions remain on the level of the mind and senses, and so they do not touch the depths of the mind anchored to being, and therefore not too deep impressions are created. There is an impression created, but not too deep impressions are created to be stored as the seed for future actions. So this is how actions performed in the present are burnt in the fire of knowledge, completely eliminating the basis of future actions. So again, when the present actions are burnt in the fire of knowledge, the knowledge of this self, then it completely eliminates the basis of future actions. So now all the past actions, all the present actions, all the future actions have been burnt in the fire of knowledge. And so this puts an end to the cycle of cause and effect in the field of action. And this in turn puts an end to the cycle of birth and death, bringing eternal freedom to life. So let me read the verse again. As a blazing fire turns fuel to ashes, so does the fire of knowledge turn all actions into ashes. Here ends the essence of the verses 36 and 37 of Maharishi's commentary of Chapter 4, Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, the yoga of knowledge of renunciation of action. So, this is a lot to digest, so I will not add any more words, and we will end here. Jai Gurudev, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu.